little while ago, FLSUN contacted me and said, "Hey, would you like a free printer?" And I was like, "Sure, why not? Printer's a printer." But I also told them that, "Hey, if you send me a printer, I'm going to tell people about it. And if I tell people about it, I'm going to tell them about the good and the bad." FLSUN was basically like, "Bet. We stand behind our product." And I was like, all right, I can vibe with that. So I sent it over, I put it together, and now we're going to talk about it. Let's talk about the kinematics. This is a Delta style machine. So if you're not familiar with how this works, instead of the print head moving forward and backwards, left or right, it moves up and down to do those motions. You see, it's got 3 articulating arms. Each one is independently controlled. And when one arm is lower than the other, it moves the direction of the print head in a different location. Because of the way these kinematics work, our build surface is a circle, not a square. This style of machine does take up a significantly larger amount of real estate wherever you're going to put it compared to other styles of machines for the similar amount of build volume that you would get out of this printer. Delta style machines are actually quite stable at high speeds. But why is that? On a Cartesian style printer like an Ender 3, the kinematics are a bit different. The problem with something like this is when you start printing on it, the mass continues to change. And that's kind of hard to compensate for if you're printing a large volume print. Alright, so let's talk about the evolution of Cartesian for a second. This is an Ender 5 Plus. On something like this, the mass of the print is no longer an issue because it's separate from the part that actually does the printing. But we still have a problem. Every time we want to move the y-axis, we also have to move the x-axis, which is cumbersome. So how do we fix that? On something like a Core XY machine, the x and the y-axis are tied together. So both the stepper motors are working together to move, whether it's a y or x-axis movement. Sounds great, but we still have that issue of constantly changing mass on the z-axis. And that's where the thought process of a delta comes in. The mass on the z-axis is always the same. That brings me into our next topic of discussion: speed. Just how fast is this machine? We were just talking about that constant mass being a big advantage. So, just how fast is a machine that takes advantage of these facts get? Well, we got a Benchy printing right now, and this thing will be done in about 10 minutes. Now, as this machine is printing, I'm sure you can hear just how loud the machine is. And that's because it's doing something rather clever. You see, unlike most machines that tie a fan directly to the hot end, the fan that cools the parts is remotely placed. So you see this big CPAP tube right here. That's where air is traveling from. It starts all the way up here on a CPAP fan and gets shoved through that tube down to the print head. Is it loud? Yeah, kind of loud. But is it effective? Yeah, it is. Now this machine claims to be able to print upwards of 1,000 millimeters per second. The reality is that's probably not realistic. See, when you print something fast, you usually only print the infill really fast, and then you go a little bit slower for the inner walls and then a lot slower for the outer walls. And that's how you maintain good quality while still getting some good speed out of a machine. Just because it advertises that it can do 1,000 millimeters per second doesn't mean that it's going to constantly print at 1,000 millimeters per second. More realistically, that's going to be your travel movement speed, or it's going to be the speed of a less detail-oriented part of your print, not the parts that are actually, pretty.
This machine is fully enclosed, so in theory you should be able to print things like ABS or ASA inside of here. In order to do that properly, though, your chamber temperature has to be relatively high up there compared to ambient temperature. So we're going to test and see just how hot we can get the chamber temperature with using just the bed as our heating source. I have put a thermostat up here at the top of the printer because I don't want to have it super close to the bed, because then it's just like, well, yeah, anything close to the bed will be warm. I want to see what the chamber temperature actually is up at the top, because if you print something big, it needs to be hot up here too. So let's set the bed to 100 degrees Celsius. So it's been 10 minutes with this machine at 100 degrees Celsius on the bed. In order to do just the bed, you have to use the web interface, and even then, the web interface likes to tell the machine to stop heating if it's not doing anything for a certain amount of time. So let's see what temperature we get. 32 degrees Celsius is what we can get the ambient temperature in the printer to be in 10 minutes of heating at 100 degrees Celsius. Now, is that good enough? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to print some stuff in ASA or ABS, one of the two. I got either. Speed is nothing if it can't produce a quality product. So we're going to talk about quality. Over here on the left, we have a benchmark from Autodesk, and over here on the right, we've got the good old Benchy. Let's talk about the Autodesk benchmark first, because it's going to give us some more quantifiable results. So first off, we've got the hole tolerance test. It prints cylinders inside of holes to see just how close you can get those walls together. And if we look closely, the only one that failed is the 0.2 millimeter test. So 0.3 millimeter and larger will produce a hole just big enough for a cylinder to fit and not get stuck. Okay, let's talk about bridging. The bridges could be better, and this comes down to a number of factors, like how good your E-steps are calibrated and how fast you go during the bridge. Overall, I'm not too concerned about it. It could be better, but it's not terrible. It's about middle of the pack. Alright, let's talk about overhangs. We got 45, 30, 20, and 15 degree overhangs. If we look at the bottom, you'll see that our overhangs are actually pretty good, honestly. It's only about, so when we get to about 20 degrees, we start to see some degradation. And 15 degrees is just a little bit too much, in my opinion, to push this machine to. The next test is about dimensional accuracy, although it requires a set of calipers. I don't have a set of calipers on me right now, so you just have to bear with me, but for what it's worth, it looks good. We're going to measure that later. I'll post some results in the description. Over here, we've got one heck of a test. It basically prints some angles and makes a surface on top of that. So kind of like gussets, I guess you could say. And then we have our stringing test, our retraction torture test, which honestly, do you see much stringing? Because I don't. I think this machine passed with flying colors on stringing. They got those retractions tuned just right for PLA. Next up is the humble Benchy. Now this Benchy could be better. I don't know the details of this Benchy because it was a pre-sliced file, but it prints in 10 minutes. So what do you get with a 10-minute Benchy? Well, you get some layer lines that are a little unsightly. You get some pushing in of the bow up at the front here, because I know that part of the print on every printer kind of likes to fold upwards for some reason. It's just a torturous spot of this print. We got some decent but not perfect bridging up at the top here. I would say that could be better, but overall, for a 10-minute print, it's not bad. In a world with ever-increasing use of proprietary technology, it's actually refreshing to see that this machine uses a standard V6 nozzle, which is pretty impressive given the amount of flow that this machine can do. It's not even a CHT nozzle. It's just your standard V6 nozzle, which means there's 1,000,001 options out there for nozzles. This is FLSUN Slicer. It's what comes with your printer, and it is what you are primarily going to use if all you have is this printer. That being said, if you have multiple printers, you probably recognize this user interface. It's pretty much just Orca Slicer, which begs the question, guys, FLSUN, bro, why not just make the Orca Slicer profile and put it in there? I don't know why we're downloading a separate application just for this specific printer when Orca can handle all of it and more. So for that reason, I'm just going to say, hey, you know what? FLSUN provides the tools you need to import your profile into Orca Slicer. So just do that. Don't bother with this. Now that being said, there is one thing that bothers me. Despite the fact that we are using a proprietary-ish slicer, we only get one profile, and that's for 0.2 millimeter layer height with PLA. Now, that's what this machine is designed for primarily, but on a machine that advertises its capability on the screen as being capable of printing ABS, I would expect to see an ABS profile, even just a generic one, or a PETG profile, because that's well within the frame of possibility for this printer as well. So, just some small things that I would like to see. This profile will get you on your way, but I expect to see more pre-tuned profiles for a printer that can do multiple styles of filament. This machine does in fact run Clipper with Mainsail as its main user interface. I like this. That's actually the configuration that I prefer. Now that being said, there are some limitations in this version of Clipper, and we'll get over that in just a second. We've got our webcam, which is approximately 10 frames per second, nothing high resolution, but it's good enough to watch your prints. Got the good old console to see what's going on. The height map looks funny because it's a square, not a circle, but it works. G-code files, standard upload, hit print, yada yada. History, you got some stats. But let's talk about the main meat and potatoes, the machine tab. Because if you look here, it says the update manager has not been initialized yet. And if we try to initialize it, it never will. And that's because this firmware is locked down. The reason they do this is because Clipper is updating all the time. And a lot of times those updates will break functionality between components. And those components will need to be reflashed with the newest version of Clipper, which is really beyond what most people are capable of when they're picking up a printer as a tool, right? If they're not technologically inclined, they're probably not going to care. But for those of us who like to tinker, this is kind of a low blow. We purchased the hardware. We should be able to do what we want with it, even if it is slightly dangerous. That being said, there's rationale behind it. Now, all that being said, we can discern some information because we can still read some of the code. So we can see certain things like what type of stepper drivers we're using on these machines. Like, I'm pretty sure these stepper drivers are running at 48 volts instead of 24 volts. And that's because it says somewhere in here. Oh yeah, TMC 5160. That's the type of stepper drivers we're using. And those bad boys can go up to like something crazy in terms of voltage, which is good because with JST style connections, you can't really go above 1 amp, but you can increase the voltage to increase the wattage. So that's neat. That's nifty. Would I recommend touching any of this? No, not unless you really know what you're doing. And even then, can you really touch it? If I hit save and restart, will it even do anything? Probably not. Still, suggestion for FLSUN, please give us the option to customize the machine, because there will be one day when y'all stop supporting this machine, and there will still be people out there who want to still use it. And it's going to be up to the open source community to continue making machines like this function for a long time, instead of throwing it into the e-waste pile in the scrap heap. Now, speaking of the scrap heap and e-waste, we got to talk about one last thing before I let y'all go, and that's repairability. The reality is, these printers are getting more and more complex, and to go faster and faster while maintaining the same quality, well, it requires some clever engineering. How exactly does one fix this machine when it wears down? Well, the instructions are mediocre at best, and unless you really get a good feel for this machine, it's probably going to be a little bit tedious, because if you want to remove just one component, well, you got to remove three, right? Because there's three articulating arms. If you want to remove the fan, you got to disassemble this entire hat to get to it. V6 is a great nozzle situation because it's open source and it's standard, but you lack features like easeability of replacing nozzles now. A lot of printers have built-in heat breaks in the nozzle to prevent clogging or oozing from in between the nozzle and the heat break. This doesn't have that feature. In one sense, you remain more open source, but in another sense, you've also made yourself harder to use for the average individual. How many people out there are buying this machine and realize you have to have the hot end hot before you start removing this style of nozzle? And then you also have to have the hot end hot while installing the nozzle. Thermal bonding is a real thing. So, there's advantages and disadvantages to every design. I think this design has the advantage of being very stable at high speed, but it comes at a cost of complexity and not very intuitive nature. It makes sense, right, that these articulating arms, how they work. And when you see it in motion, it's like, yeah, you can gather, like, yeah, that works. But if you want to just remove one piece, because there's three separate pieces, 1, 2, 3, one for each arm, you have to unscrew this entire base, lift this up, and then unscrew down there, which is not terrible, honestly, and then this slat pulls out, and you've got one of your pieces. Now, assuming it's something wrong inside there, the easiest thing to do would be to get a replacement whole piece and just slat it back in. If you're going to be repairing at a component level, well, like replacing the belts, well, now you're talking about doing all that work and more. Now you're talking about disconnecting the effector, which is your hot end, and then you're talking about disconnecting all this at the top, at the bottom, and then pulling out this slat, disassembling however far you down you need to get before you even get to the belt. The belt and the belt tensioner are down there. It doesn't look terrible. It also doesn't look super easy. We got linear rails back there, which is nice. Linear rails will need to be lubed every kilogram. At least that's my maintenance schedule. So, considering this machine is going to be heavily utilizing those rails for every movement, yeah, once every kilogram is probably a good idea.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this review, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, leave me a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos like this, consider subscribing. And remember, measure twice, print once.